and welcome back to the Motorgraph World channel. Today we're doing a comparison between Toyota's compact hybrid SUV and Hyundai's new Tucson. Let's look at the advantages of each vehicle and which one wins out of the comparison. So we have the two cars side by side here. What do you think? Well, personally for me, my eyesight went automatically to the Hyundai Tucson. If you look at the differences, you see the Hyundai Tucson being a little bit more modern, a little bit more smoother in the design, whereas the RAV4 is a very traditional hybrid compact SUV look. This one also has the hidden daytime running lamps up here, whereas the RAV4 has a very traditional look. One more thing for the RAV4, they have this blue on the logo, also noting that this is the hybrid model. But for the Tucson, you don't see any differences between the hybrid or the gasoline versions in terms of the design. If you look at the side profile, there is nothing that really stands out. It's just a very traditional looking off-road SUV, and it has more of a rugged look. I noticed that they also used a little bit of chrome detail on both the door handles as well as the upper roof area. One more design detail that we can see is that they wanted to give a floating roof. So that's why you see the details. So now the Hyundai Tucson. The profile is one of the design elements that I didn't really like about the Tucson because of the messy lines. Of course, there are a lot of our viewers who thought that these lines were beautiful. So this is really something that's in the eye of the beholder. But for me, apart from the lines, I think that overall it has a very sleek design. It's much more modern compared to the RAV4, and a little bit less of the chrome detailing on the door handles is personally what I like best. So now let's look at the rear view for both of the cars. Let's first start with the RAV4. It looks more of a box-like design, and I thought that it was very just traditional of a Japanese SUV. But one thing good about it was that this angle of the rear window, it's not slanted. When you see from the room mirror, you have a little bit better line of sight. So it offers a bit better visibility. One difference I see from two of these models is that the rear wiper, this one is on the bottom, whereas the new Tucson, it's hidden up top. This is one of the design features that we all like very much. Of course, if you look down here, so you can see the exhaust pipes that are a little bit protruding, whereas the Tucson, they're hidden down here. Again, looking at the Tucson, and it has a more of a slanted design, a bit more fluidity in the overall design. You have the new tail lamp designs as well. Another design feature that was quite contested, blinkers are way down here. This is another design feature that we commonly see in a lot of the Hyundai design models. So now let's pop open the trunk. So I see that it's quite spacious. The height of the trunk is quite high, so I can perfectly or very comfortably fit in it. And even with the overall space inside, it's quite spacious and you have enough height to put a lot of your luggage in. So if you do fold up the seats, you have this kind of angle, so it doesn't completely become flat, but still you have a lot of room. One thing that I also noticed was that this part is a bit lower compared to the Tucson. And so if you're lifting heavy luggage and putting it into your trunk, it would be easier to load onto the trunk as well. So now let's look inside the lower compartment, and you have, yes, the spare tire. A lot of our viewers really like the spare tire option, but for the RAV4, yes, you do have a spare tire. And as for utility inside the trunk, you have the 12 volts on your right-hand side. And now moving on to the Tucson, let's get in. Oh, a little bit higher compared to the RAV4. And as you can see, my head kind of gets stuck on the ceiling. It's not hugely small, except for the height of the car. And now let's try folding up the seats again. Remember with the Tucson in the showroom, it completely became flat. But this one is a hybrid model, and the batteries are below the second row seats. So it's not completely flat, but still you have a lot of space if you fold down the seats. Let's look at what you have in the lower compartment of the Tucson. Unfortunately, you don't have the spare tire in this option, but you do have the repair toolkit inside. For the utility, you have one 12-volt on your left-hand side for the Tucson. So now I'm inside the RAV4. It's quite a rugged feel at first glance. It matches the overall look on the exterior as well as interior. If you look at the line of sight and visibility, although this car has a higher height compared to the Tucson, for me it feels like it's much more narrow. It's not bad per se, but it's definitely more narrow compared to the Tucson. And with the seats, these are slightly more bucket type seats compared to the Tucson. For me, I'm quite a small girl, but nevertheless, it still quite wraps around the driver. A lot of people might prefer this kind of seating because they give you more comfort. And I must say that these are very comfortable seats with a lot of cushion. As for the materials that are used inside, they're a bit softer in these areas. You have a little bit more of a cushiony feel for the overall interior. And here as well, you have a bit more cushion. You have manual dials as well as the screen. I do prefer to have the analog buttons and not have it completely digitized because it's just more intuitive when you're driving on the road. And I really do like the gear knob because this is one feature that I always miss from the new Hyundai designs. So for the RAV4, my favorite object inside is the gear knob. And now let's take a look at the storage that you have. The two water bottle, and of course you have the middle compartment, and inside it's not that large. You also have this area here for the passenger seat. It's patterned with the same kind of patterning you have for the charger here. As I mentioned before, the seats of the RAV4, you have a lot of cushion in them. And so even with the second row, it's very comfortable. This one has two different levels, so you can adjust if you're sitting more upright or if you want to lean back. It's not a big angle, but still you have a little bit more comfort. You have enough room for the back row seats. Of course, I did adjust the seat position of the driver's seat to my height. So this driver's seat may push back a little bit, but nevertheless, you have a lot of leg room in front of your knees. And the materials for the second row are also quite soft. So that's the benefit of the RAV4, I think. For the center console, you have the two air vents here, and then you also have the two USB ports so that you can charge your phones. The armrest for the second row, you have two cup holders. If you're sitting in the center, actually, it provides you with lumbar support, so it might not be that uncomfortable at all. So now I'm inside the Tucson, and I think that you might be able to tell by the smile on my face that I really do like the interior of this car. I think it's great. This car is, in fact, 1 centimeter wider than the RAV4, but it feels to me that it's much more wider than that because of the visibility. The Tucson seems like it's much more of an open and clear view. I mentioned that the RAV4 has kind of bucket type seat. It's a much more of a narrower seat. For these seats, they're quite comfortable. They're a bit wider. One thing, they do have a little bit less cushion compared to the RAV4, but that doesn't mean that these seats are uncomfortable. It's just relatively speaking, the RAV4 has more cushion. You can tell that Hyundai has also thought about what kind of materials they use for the interior of the cars. I really do like two-tone, not in terms of color, but of the materials, because here you have the type of polyurethane, but here you have a fabric of some sort. It's the same color, but of a different kind of texture. So I really like this. Overall, you see fluidity in the design. It has these overarching lines that start from this side, the door, all the way to the passenger's door. And you don't have the housing for the digital cluster here. At first, I thought that it might be difficult to read the digital cluster when you're outside. It's noon in Korea right now, but I have no problem with it right now. And one more thing that we mentioned in the first review, you have the screen that's built in the middle, and then you also have the buttons down here. It might be a little bit difficult to find all the buttons because they're in just one area when you're driving on the road. So that might be a little bit of a safety issue. They use this kind of high glossy black material for a lot of their elements inside the car. It looks quite chic and classy, but it's a dust magnet and it's also a fingerprint magnet. So you might want to keep, a wiper handy so that you can actually wipe off the dirt and the dust all the time. You also have the center console with the 2 cup holders, and you have the buttons for the parking, the rear, neutral, and drive. And you also have the knob for the drive mode. In terms of drive mode, you have the Smart, Sport, and Eco mode. So now I'm in the back seat of the Tucson. The front 2 seats are a bit more rounder than the RAV4, so you have a little bit more space to be able to see outside, so you have better line of visibility and line of sight. Of course, you also have that panoramic sunroof, which adds to the openness and the brightness of the overall vehicle. As for comfort, I mentioned that the RAV4 was really comfortable in terms of the seats. Compared to that, these are a bit harder, but that doesn't mean that they're not comfortable. You still have a lot of cushion in these seats as well, and you can adjust the backrest. So you have availability of going back all the way. This is as far as it goes. And of course, if you want to sit upright, this is also a good option. And for the center armrest, this isn't as big as the one that we saw in the RAV4, but you don't need a huge armrest anyway. This is a good size, and you have 2 cup holders in the middle as well. Of course, for the center console, you have the 2 air vents, and of course the 2 USB ports. This one has a very low center tunnel as well. I think both the RAV4 and the Tucson have a lot of space for legroom for the center seat. One thing that I found out was quite neat. It's a very small detail, but in the back seat, you have these grooves for your safety belt. You know how when you're driving and this kind of clanks around all the time? If you just have no one sitting in the second row, you can just put in the buckle inside this groove and you won't have that problem. And you also have the seat heaters in 2 different levels this time compared to the RAV4. So that's another plus. So I'm going for around 80 kilometers per hour at the moment. But then when I speed up, it feels, and the sound of it feels as if the engine is having a difficult time getting up to that speed. So let's try speeding up. 120 kilometers per hour, and you heard that engine really revving up again. And now we're almost at 90 to 100 kilometers per hour, and you still have a certain level of noise, don't you? But now I'm going to test how it is at 100. As for the responsiveness of the engine and the switch, I think it's quite clunky and loud, you know? It's not seamless. A lot of the hybrids these days are very subtle and sophisticated, and then they kind of like transform into this beast. But for this one, I think it's very utilitarian, literally the sports utility vehicle. So everything, like even the design, the interior, it feels to me like a Porter truck. which is exactly the truck that I started driving with. And even with the pedal, when you step on the accelerator, there's maybe a second or two of a lag before it actually picks up this pace. Having said all that, see, with the lane change blinker too, you can really hear the blinker going. It's very analog. Like all of the dials, the knobs, and all of that is quite analog. Cornering. On corners, I feel that the car is quite stable. Overall stability of the vehicle when it's turning into corners, I think it's quite good. So now we're heading into the highway, but first of all, before we even accelerate or decelerate, I love the fact that it's very quiet. A stark difference from the RAV4, which I mentioned. Actually, the engine tells you what it's doing. Okay, I'm accelerating, I'm decelerating, but this one is very quiet. Now, right now, I'm over 100, and it's at 60 right now. Now let's try speeding up a bit. And even if I step on the gas, it's very responsive, very quiet, and it accelerates very smoothly too. I'm very amazed. I mean, the car is great for all I can tell. One thing though, the steering wheel is a bit too light for me again. But then again, I've had some people, some of my friends tell me that they like the fact that the steering wheel is much lighter. It's easier for them to control. But when you're driving at fast speeds and when you're speeding, sometimes you want the steering wheel to kind of be there for you, make you be assured that it's in control. Whereas if it's too light, when you're going at faster speeds, it kind of like flips back and forth, and so it makes you a little bit anxious. But I am going a little bit faster, but still, you don't feel that it's unstable. And maybe it's because I had experience with the RAV4 just before the Tucson, but the RAV4 kind of you felt that you had to really step on the gas in order to get up to the speed. But for the Tucson, I'm only just lightly putting my foot on the pedal, and it goes very smoothly. It has no difficulty whatsoever getting up to that speed. You don't hear the engine having a lot of trouble getting up to that speed either. And so I'm going to try the sports mode as well. And the sports mode can go faster. So right now I don't have my foot on the pedal. It's cruising. And now my hands are off the steering wheel as well, but it's still going. But at some point, the car is going to tell me to put my hands back on the steering wheel right now. So that's what I do. And because I have the lane assist and the cruise control on, if I try to deviate from the lane, it will alert me with that sound. Let's try it. And it goes back. So this model also cleans up the air inside. It determines the particulate matter inside the vehicle. And just now I had a message pop up saying that the air pollution is bad outside, so we have cut off all the air intake from outside. So the cars are indeed getting smarter. Maybe one small drawback, the rear window is a bit smaller compared to the RAV4. But other than that, I can't really find a lot of drawbacks for this car, especially when you're comparing with the RAV4. So I personally think that the Tucson is a sedan morphed into an SUV, urban SUV. Whereas the RAV4 was more of the truck slash off-road SUV to make it more urban or to make it more suitable for a compact SUV. The starting point is different for both of the cars. So guys, what did you think about our comparison between the RAV4 and the Tucson? For me, the Tucson was a big hit. I am completely considering buying it for myself. Please tell us what you think about the two cars, and of course, remember to hit subscribe. Thank you for watching.